Hi, my name's Leilani Clark, and I'm a native Tucsonan. I've lived here in Barrio Centro my entire life. I actually come from many different cultural backgrounds. My mother is Native American. She's two tribes, Dene, from the Nanetishetabaha clan, the Zuni Edgewater clan, it's Navajo, and also from Santa Clara Pueblo, from northern New Mexico. And my father's African American from the Bay Area. So I come with this different cultural mix, but then I see how completely close to the border Tucson, Arizona is. We're just a city like 70 miles north of the U.S.-Mexico border, so we've always had a very binational culture. So people would come here and they don't understand the regional history, the cultural history, and that's created a very big clash. Ever since 2006, that's where I received my start into politics with the student walkouts that happened. A bill came out called the Sensen Burner Bill. It was HR 4437, and from there, massive walkouts were happening all throughout the nation. And I contextualized it to the high school students that HR 4437 was basically like a nationwide version of Senate Bill 1070, but only more extreme as well. Teachers were going to have to screen through each of their students if they were here documented or undocumented. Doctors, in order to treat patients, they were going to have to screen through all of their patients' documents. Business owners, if you were going to be renting an apartment or selling a car, you had to screen through people's documents. So our communities obviously just went through an outrage, because the communities here, like, it's just a state of facts. Like, there's a lot of mixed status families here. I have so many friends who you stand up when you ask, is there any fear that people of your families or people that you know, they can be deported? And that's just the way that it is down here. It's just really sad that this piece of paper is determining if they're here or not. And families that have been here for 25 plus years, we're not really taking into account just how long the processing goes for people to become legal status here. So in the springtime, last spring, April 2010, you had this bill that passed the Senate Appropriations Committee called Senate Bill 1070, and that was, again, it was going to be the same measures, but they were bringing in this whole context called where the police had the authority now to question people who were deemed reasonably suspicious. So with that, again, the community just went through an outcry, and actually the day that this bill, Senate Bill 1070, passed both the House and the Senate, on April 15th, a massive statewide raid happened in the state of Arizona. 800 ICE agents were sent to our state, and so raids happened in the city of Phoenix, in the city of Tucson, in Nogales, and that was just kind of the preview of what was going to be coming here to the state of Arizona, because you had a lot of arrests that happened that day, 63 arrests in total throughout the state of Arizona, and out of those arrests, 17 of them were administrative arrests. That means they were here legally, they were U.S. citizens, but at the wrong place at the wrong time, without proper identification, with brown skin. So people were being thrown off the Sunshine buses, they were being pulled out of cars, and these checkpoints were happening. We're like, that is what Senate Bill 1070 is gonna be bringing to our communities. It was like instant warfare. So what we did a lot, me and 8 other individuals, we were all students. I came from Tucson, but then the majority of them, another compa of mine, she came from Tucson as well, but the rest of them were ASU students. We decided to do an action just to show to the country just how severe this crisis is going to be to our communities, the attacks on our community, just for being brown people in the state of Arizona. So we chained ourselves to the Arizona State Capitol building on April 20th. That was the Tuesday right after that raid that happened, and we were basically bringing about this crisis to our state, because we were saying we've done everything by the books to get our voices out there, to show just how much the communities are being attacked by the legislation in Arizona. We voted, we've marched, we've done vigils, we fasted, we voted for Obama, we've called our state legislatures, we faxed them, we've emailed them, and they still have not taken our voices into consideration, let alone into account. So we felt that the next wave of the immigrant rights movement was to bring forth these acts of nonviolent civil disobedience. So that's what we did. So we chained ourselves to the Arizona State Capitol building, basically with the whole message in mind that we will not physically remove ourselves from this building until Governor Jan Brewer vetoes the bill, which she didn't. She ended up signing on Friday, but it just brought this whole powerful wave of just inspiration across the nation as well. The next week, you actually had students, they chained themselves along an intersection in LA to prevent a Border Patrol vehicle from going into the communities. You had many students as well protest at a jail station in Texas, basically saying, you know what, we don't have papers, so arrest us. Everybody was just really standing in solidarity with Arizona at the time, and it kind of brought this intense wave of what's the next steps are going to be to fight for our social justice down here. We have the issues of Senate Bill 1070, and again, like, even with the injunction, our communities are still feeling them. And again, even with that being said, 1070 just didn't fall from the sky overnight. We've always felt Senate Bill 1070. We just saw when this bill came out, it was just the state of Arizona saying not only continue on this business, but now it's going to be enforced with with the migra acting like the cops and the cops acting like the migra. That's just always been down here ever since the increased militarization of the border happened after 1994. We've seen this intense wave of just the militarization entering into our communities as well. Then we have the whole banning of ethnic studies as well. Arizona, like, it's safe to say that right after you have this bill that's basically attacking basically people of color for their outside appearance, a few weeks later you have the passing of HB 2281, which said that we can't practice our cultural heritage and we can't learn them in the classrooms. So what were people of color like supposed to think when the state of Arizona had all these attacks on us? So that's kind of just where we stand right now, and the students, they're really in actions right now to be defending these classes that have a 97.5 graduation rate. So we're just continuing on the struggle, and we hope for the best just in our state, in our local communities, and then as well as the nation as well, because what happens in Arizona, it's not going to be staying here. Like, this is just a predecessor of what's to come. If the hatred doesn't stop here, it's going to spread nationwide.
My name is John Washington, and I am a graduate student here at the U of A. I've been living in Arizona for about 2 years, and my relationship to border politics, specifically SB1070, started when I began volunteering with the organization No More Deaths, and I was working in Nogales, Sonora, with migrants who were recently deported. And, you know, when it really came to a head for me and for many people here in Arizona and at the university was when 1070 was signed into law late April. And the bill for me and the organizing around it is about as much as the legislature's, sort of racist or oppressive tendencies, as much as it is about the public's relationship to politics these days. And so organizing, I was part of a group that led a number of protests and collected about 1,500 signatures trying to get the president of the university to publicly decry the law, which never really happened. He was really sort of, lukewarm about his denial or his reaction to the law. But so the law was about the public's relationship to politics, which I think is mostly passive and uninformed. When I first started reading about the law, when it was first introduced into the state senate, it was in early February, and it was getting almost no page time in the local papers, and I was aghast and wondering why people weren't starting to take up arms about it. And then when it was actually signed into law in late April, I emailed a couple people, other people who I know do organizing around border politics, and I said, so what's the plan? What's going on? And everyone that I asked said, I don't know. I haven't heard anything. And I said, well, what is going on? So I, started emailing a couple people, and we said, we need to put something together. And we only had a week to do it or so before school let out for the summer. And it was always an uphill battle. I mean, from the start, it was not only an uphill battle, but it seemed like even most of the people that we had helping us organize, with a number of exceptions, were kind of clamping down on the brakes throughout the organizing process. And it's amazing that what I see is like a really sort of removed stance that the public takes with politics these days, and where they're not getting involved, and they're not interested to get involved either, or they take a very just passive stance against things that even ideologically or very personally they really do not agree with. And I saw that across the board, and I think organizing for me and for a couple other people that were involved was about as much as our goal of getting the president to decry the law, as much as setting, some sort of stance that there's a number of students at the University of Arizona who don't agree with it. It was about just getting people involved, just sort of practicing, like, yeah, we can actually, speak out, and we'll get a little bit of media attention, and we'll be a little bit of a voice in the community. And, it's amazing. The other aspect that I saw, besides the passivity, was just how uninformed people were about the politics and the history of the border. Like my students, I teach freshman composition courses. My students, who I would talk to, for the most part, had no idea what was going on. or even after there was such a huge, brouhaha in the state about this whole 1070 business this year, I asked my students, so about 1070, who knows what's going on? And one or two people raised their hands who grew up in Phoenix. And yet at the same time, they have this, I call it something like an isolated interconnectivity, where as soon as I start talking about the class being over, people take out their iPads or their cell phones and they're texting with each other, and they're, in sort of these very isolated gossip circles, but they're not using these technologies to learn about either local or global politics, and they know nothing about what's going on the border, and yet they live in a border town like Tucson. And so it was about not only engaging in politics, this protest that we were doing last year, about engaging with politics and trying to say that, we can have a little bit of a voice, but also about educating people a little bit, and ourselves very much, trying to talk to people about what was going on, trying to, go beyond like the knee-jerk reactions a lot of people were having to the flooding of migrants coming to the state, and talk about, why, or the background, or the, economic background of why so many people were coming. And so there's like many different goals for this movie that I was involved with. And I think one of the important things that we realized early on too is that we should set our goals as reachable ones, as well as, like our ultimate goal, of course, was to get 1070 not only joined but repealed, but also just like to set a small goal, like to get our president to say, I don't agree with this law, and like that would be a sign for other states that say, oh, if we pass a law like this, the public universities are gonna put up a little bit of a fight. And though that didn't happen, we at least put a little bit of pressure on the president, and we got a little bit of media attention. So I think some of these smaller goals were successful. Further engagement, further education, and a little bit of pressure on our president.
Hi, my name is Christina Bettis, and I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I remember in April or May 2009 when talk about anti-immigrants started happening and getting much more tough, and Sheriff Joe Arpaio started getting his raids, since immigrant raids. And there was like a lot of student walkouts in May of 2009, and you would just see like floods of white t-shirts down the roads, like just thousands of them. And I remember what got to me was I was watching the news and there was a little kid crying, and he was saying that he didn't want to be separated from his family, and that all he knew was here in Arizona, and his family was here undocumented, so they were going to be forced back to Mexico, and he didn't want that to happen. And when I saw a little kid, he was no more than like 7 years old, I realized I really wanted to get more involved and fight legislations like SB1070, because they're not only just being prejudiced and promoting racism against people of color and people that look illegal. They're going to be separating families and tearing families apart. And I remember in like April of last year, my friend emailed me telling me that they were trying to organize a rally here on campus on the mall. So I got involved, and we were gathering signatures to try to petition President Shelton to publicly condemn the law, which he didn't do, of course. But as I was gathering signatures, I was, expecting people to be like, no, thank you, like, I support the law or something. And some people were like that. But there were people that would actually, like, get angry with me for just even thinking about asking them for a signature. And one guy actually started yelling at me. He kept stepping closer to me and flinging his arms all over the place. And I'm only 5'1". This guy was like 6 feet at least. And I just stood there because I was like, I could not believe what was happening. And finally, one of the organizers, he came up and he told the guy to leave. And that was pretty intense. But, like, we still have to keep fighting for this stuff. We can't let things like that, stop us and be like, oh, that's dangerous, I don't want to do it. Because, like, you're never alone. You're going to have people there helping you, and that's what's the great thing about this is we need people together, working together to fight anti-immigrant laws and laws that are just inhumane in general, not just anti-immigrant, they're just against basic human rights. So since SB1070, we've noticed a lot more racism going around. People like blatantly tell things to me and my boyfriend. He's white and I'm Mexican. So, we have different skin color, and people blatantly go out and say something racist to us just because we're together. And that's pretty much what it is down here in Arizona.
Hi, my name is Brandon Mays, and I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and lived there, in mostly neighborhoods where there was a lot of people of color. Most of my friends were Mexican, and most of their family, including themselves, were undocumented. I really never thought about immigrant issues or felt anything about it because I'm white, and most white people don't have to deal with those things. And I didn't really have to deal with those things until I got with my girlfriend, who is Mexican, and some of her family is undocumented. And she's very passionate about the recent legislations and laws and how immigrants and people of color have to feel in their day-to-day lives. I never really had to feel about that until I got with her, and people yelled out of the cars while we were sitting at the bus stop white power, and actually went as far as to call me a race traitor on the bus when I was with her. I never really had to feel how people of color have to feel every day, and how they're put down sometimes, such as the recent legislation SB1070, and then how that has affected lives. In May of 2010, I gathered signatures for a protest that we had here on the UA campus, and that really got me really passionate about how I feel about immigrants and stuff. And Arizona is just messed up in how they treat people of color and immigrants, the nation as well. And also after the recent legislations, it's becoming more clear that Arizona is not in its anti-immigration laws soon. Arizona is further allowing just racism to grow within our whole nation. So now we must continue the fight and work together in order to get a solution to the issues about immigration problems.